Hey everybody, this is Rob, and today I'm going to be talking about Ready Player One, both the book and the film. But don't worry, there won't be any plot spoilers until the end of the video, and I'll let you know when that is. So if you haven't seen the film or read the book, and you still want to get to that, then you can safely watch this video up until that point. But first, I should probably let you know that I didn't actually read the book, not technically anyway. I did read parts of it, but I ended up having it read to me by Will Wheaton, courtesy of audible.com. But I just want to make it known that when I say when I read it in the book, it really was me listening to it. And I think that does make a difference because there's a lot of dramatic elements to an audiobook. I don't know if you all had listened to an audiobook before, but I hadn't until Ready Player One. It was actually the very first audiobook I listened to. And it took about 15 hours, to be honest with you. So it's actually slower than if you read it yourself. I'm not a slow reader by any means, but I get bored when I look at a book and I see the words just kind of run together, and I lose my train of thought and have to go back and reread things. So yeah, having it read to me while I'm driving, much better. And in fact, when you take a long road trip, it's actually a really good thing to have, in your back pocket. If you don't have any podcasts or anything like that, an audiobook is great. And that's how I really delved into the world of Ready Player One. So anyway, I read the book and I was super hyped for the movie. By the time I got to the book, it was already in production for a 2017 release. And when I was listening to it, I just kept thinking, how in the hell are they going to make this into a movie? First of all, they have the licensing nightmare because they have all these references in the book. They're all 80s references in the book, and I'll get to that in a little bit about the film. But there's all these iconic 80s references that they just don't work. You need them, otherwise the book doesn't work. And I knew Steven Spielberg was at the helm, and I knew that Ernest Cline was involved in writing the screenplay along with Zach Penn. So I kind of had high hopes for it, but I was still thinking, I don't know how they're going to do this. But not only is there the licensing problems, but also the book is, this is where everybody comes and, they see the film version of their favorite novel and they're always like, oh, the book was better. And I was just kind of like, shun those people because whatever, dude. Okay, fine. You read novels, you read books. I actually read a lot of nonfiction. I can get into that, but anyway, I'm to get away from that part. It's just a very detailed book, and everything that was in it, I didn't see how that was going to transfer into a film. It was great for a book, but I just didn't, you go and do things that just, it's hard to imagine them being on the screen and people not being bored out of their skulls. So, of course, they went and they changed a lot of things. In fact, I feel safe in saying, just if you've read the book, just take every reference that you knew in the book and just throw it out the window. Just completely throw it out. There'll be a few that are still left, but for the most part, and you'll probably see all of those or most of those in the trailer if you've seen the trailer, but every other reference, just throw it out the window because they're completely different. There's still a whole heck of a lot of references. A lot of them are in the background really in the film. If you're watching, I actually saw it twice, so I have a new perspective on it. But if you have the luxury of having seen it already before, you can kind of look off into the background and notice things that you never noticed before. And those are kind of the bulk of the references. They're passing by 1 or 2 second clips of things, something on the wall, maybe something referenced in a line of dialogue. But for the most part, the core of the plot doesn't rely a whole heck of a lot on the references back to the 80s. And in the film, they transition from the 80s and 90s, all 80s from the book to 80s, 90s, 2000s, even 2010. It's basically contemporary all the way up to now. Now the book is set in the future, and I believe the film is actually set in the same time frame, although things are shifted. For example, the time frame when the Oasis, which you should know what that is, even if spoiler free, when the Oasis was created, it was much earlier in the book, and it kind of didn't make sense for me, but they made that a little bit later. So there's changes in the book, in the film that make sense. I think I would have changed that as well. And then honestly, the references are fine. I was just disappointed. I was disappointed that what I had in my head, I thought I was going to get a truncated version with some changes because of the licensing deals. I thought I was going to get a truncated version of the book as a film, but instead I got a completely different set of I mean, the basic plot's the same, but everything else is different. The names are the same, but yeah, if you're like, oh, this is going to be so awesome when I see it on the screen, just don't even just throw that away. Honestly, this is already a week late. I saw this on a Wednesday night preview. I got the 10 p.m. tickets because 7 o'clock was the early seating. I actually went to the Draft House, my favorite theater. I went to the Draft House just on a whim and checked to see if they were selling them yet, because they hadn't announced it. And sure enough, they had some tickets. So I bought the 10 p.m. Wednesday night tickets. And so I was super hyped for it. My girlfriend and I had listened to the audiobook. She had actually read it as well. And we were super hyped for this thing. And I probably should have made a video immediately after that night when I got home to give my fresh impressions. But honestly, like, it may have turned out even better because I just saw it yesterday again. This time I saw it in 3D. And so I have a slightly different perspective on it. And the other thing is that since then, I've talked to some people that have seen it. I actually went with my girlfriend, her 15-year-old son, who had a completely different perspective because he didn't understand a lot of the references, and he saw it more as just like it's an action movie, and he really enjoyed it. And then I also saw it with my friend Ricky, who is about my age and understands all the references, but didn't read the book. He read parts of it or listened to parts of it, didn't get through it all. So he has a perspective of like, I'm watching this as a person of the right age to understand the references, but I don't necessarily feel as disappointed by things not being in the book, you know. So I got some perspective on that. And then finally, Taylor, who is kind of in the middle, he gets the references for the most part, but he didn't read the book, and he was actually very down on the whole thing from the beginning. Well, he was down on it, then he was kind of okay with it, and then when he found out that there was newer references, it wasn't just targeting the 80s, he was like, oh, they're just pandering to a larger crowd, and this is just a bunch of garbage. But he saw it, and actually he had a positive outlook on it or positive opinion of it afterward as well. So I think everybody that I've spoken to that has seen it has been positive about it. It's just a varying level of positivity. I don't even, that doesn't sound right, but they were positive to various levels. Like when I first got out of it, I was still I still feel like it's a good film, but I was just disappointed, while Jacob, my girlfriend's 15-year-old son, he was like, yeah, that was awesome. And, my girlfriend still liked it, and she was, she's very familiar with the book, of course, and Ricky did too. So everybody liked it. It's just, I guess my advice to you, if you haven't seen the film yet and you've read the book, is just throw out everything that you expect to see, and then you'll enjoy it more. I know I did the next time I saw it because I knew what to expect, but overall I still think it's a very entertaining film. And if you can see it in IMAX 3D, definitely do so. That's one of the things that I think made Taylor appreciate it a little bit more, is that he saw it on a giant screen in 3D, and it definitely doesn't disappoint if you're in for the gorgeous scenery. So anyway, those are my general thoughts on the book and the translation into a film. So at this point, I'm going to start talking about things that were just completely different or just plot elements. So if you want to stop listening or watching, go ahead and do so now. Okay, so if you're still watching or listening, if you're just doing the audio version of this, then you're going to get some plot spoilers. Hopefully you've already seen the film. Things that changed dramatically that I didn't care for, although I understood, were they changed war games into basically that whole element got turned into The Shining, which, see, I had been watching all the films and playing the games up until the movie, hoping to kind of, I'd watched maybe 85-90% of the movies that were referenced in Ready Player One, but I was trying to kind of catch up and do the last time. Like, I hadn't seen Highlander. I hadn't seen Highlander. I hadn't seen Phantasm. I knew of them, so the references weren't completely lost on me. But then I saw the film, and I'm like, oh, I didn't waste my time because I still got to enjoy these old movies. But I didn't need to do any of that because they were just, they're all gone. instead of I have seen The Shining, but if I knew The Shining was going to be that big a part of the movie, I would have seen it again recently so I could compare the two. But even like it was kind of cool because it was a surprise when The Shining came out. I was not expecting it, and I thought it looked amazing. I don't know if they took the original film and just kind of superimposed the characters on there because I haven't seen it in so long. Taylor seems to think that they rebuilt the sets or went back and filmed on location or whatever, but it looked so convincing that they were in the movie The Shining. And speaking of being in, when they're in the Oasis, the Taylor and I didn't like the character designs of any of the avatars. You have H, who's this, I don't even know what, a bionic, muscle bound, whatever. I didn't really care for the design of Artemis either. It was like, whatever, pixie look, kind of alien looking, really weird big eyes. I thought it was a little distracting, but, they were okay. The Daito and Shoto were just so generic. I guess they were like that in the book as well. And then, you have Mr. Final Fantasy, Parzival, who just looks like he could have been part of any Final Fantasy with some modifications. So, I don't know. Overall, I was a little disappointed in the avatars look. And then they have this uncanny valley look to them, even when they're supposed to be other characters or other people in the Oasis. They have a weird look to them, and it doesn't look right. Whereas everything else in the Oasis has a super hyper realistic look. Like if you're, in New York City, it looks like New York City. It doesn't look like a video game version of New York City. It kind of does, I guess. But for the most part, like for example, when they went to Sorrento and they tricked him into thinking that he had left the Oasis, but he was still inside the Oasis, it looked hyper realistic. He thought he was he thought that he was outside of the Oasis. It was so real. But yet the characters, there they looked real. But then, you look at the other characters and there's this uncanny valley look to them, and I did not appreciate at all. I didn't like, but I understood that they removed the gates completely, could completely remove them. So in the book, they had the keys, which led to, then you had a hint to find the gate, which the key would open, and there was a challenge inside the gate. So there was the key, the gate, then another key, then a gate, then another key, the gate, etc. Well, not etc. There's only 3. But in the book, in the film, lack of time, they got to scrunch this all down into, 2 to 3 hours. They just remove the gates completely. You got a key, move on. And that was kind of disappointing. But then again, they changed everything anyway, so it wouldn't have been the same. Also, there wasn't any focus on Ludus. I thought that was pretty important. Ludus is the planet where everybody went to school in the Oasis. And they just completely removed that. They made one little, I noticed on the second viewing, they made one little reference to it in the opening sequence. They have a little thing on Ludus. But yeah, they just completely removed that. And again, I think that's a timing thing. Plus, the first gate and key were on Ludus, and they just replaced that with the race, which was cool. The race was cool to see in IMAX 3D and all that stuff, but, I was more into it the second time. I was so shocked the first time I couldn't even enjoy it. I couldn't even enjoy the race. I'm like, this... I saw the race in the trailer, and I'm like, where the hell does this happen? I didn't realize it was the whole, how you get the key. And so I was kind of shocked at the first time I saw it. Second time I watched it, I was like, okay, I know this race is coming. I know everything's different. And I was able to actually enjoy it. And it was really cool. And Taylor made some comments that made sense to me. I'm not a fan of Michael Bay, but if you watch Michael Bay films, there are all these jump cuts everywhere. You see like a half-second clip of an elbow in Transformers, and then like a punch to the face, and like a half-second clip of this and this. And it's all like, it's 1 or 2 second clips at most of the whole fight. When they were actually showing the race, they actually had long sequences. There were still cuts, action cuts, but there was long enough sequences where they would follow a car around, or Akira's bike, or Kaneda's bike from Akira, or Bigfoot, and which, by the way, I loved. I loved that Bigfoot was in. There were certain things that I did like that they changed. Bigfoot wasn't in the book, but I love that H drove Bigfoot. At least I don't remember H driving Bigfoot. But in any case, we appreciated the cinematography in that scale. Also, now that I'm talking about the kind of enjoying it in IMAX 3D, the 3D wasn't very prevalent. A couple of times I took my glasses off to even see if was there any, when you take your glass off, you can see the blurriness. was like, was there any 3D in the film? You really don't need to see it in 3D. If you can see it on a nice big screen, if you have Cinemarks, they have this thing called XD. Watch it in XD, that's pretty cool. If you can watch it in IMAX and it's in 3D, that's fine too. But you really don't need it in 3D. I think 3D still, the technology still kind of makes the whole picture darker. So, but anyway, I don't want to get too much into that. But yeah, just overall, I enjoyed the film. I understand why they had to change some things. Some things I don't understand, like why did they change Shoto to Sho? Is it because they didn't want it? It sounded too close to Daito, Shoto, and Daito, maybe. And I thought those two characters were very underdeveloped in the film. Again, I understand time constraints. Daito doesn't even live in the book. He gets found out. His real identity gets found out, just like Wade's does, and they murder him outside of the Oasis. In the film, he's fine. Also, they didn't show. I mean, they alluded to it, how he got the. I didn't notice it until the second viewing, how he got the ability to turn into a Gundam. There wasn't. It was kind of a different. There was more giant robot battles in the book, and so they didn't really. I mean, they alluded to it when they're on Planet Doom, and then, they said, what was it, the what are those things called? Those special items. The name escapes me. I don't play MMORPGs. So I can't, Icon, no, whatever it was. That little he won the gauntlet, I guess. That gave him the ability to become a Gundam for 2 minutes, and Daito should have been dead. So anyway, that changed. What else was something I didn't really care for? Changing the name of Sho. I don't know. I guess overall, I nitpick, and if you're just in the mood for an action film and you don't have your heart set on viewing or trying to get a film version of the book, you'll probably be okay. I know what I wanted to say. The thing that I wanted to talk to Taylor about is it would have been nice if this would have been picked up by Netflix or something where it would be a miniseries where they can just play out everything. They're not relying on making $500 million to make their money back. So they would be able to make a miniseries of it, and it could be a lot more faithful to the book. The problem with that, I see, is that they may not have the ability to get the licensing if Netflix doesn't have the clout that Steven Spielberg has. If Steven Spielberg comes to you and say, "Hey, we want to use this in the movie," it's like, hell yeah, you take it, use it. It'll bolster our brand. I saw Doritos several times in there, which was funny because the Doritos. I have this thing when I watch old movies. I tend to see food packages and I focus on it because, like, I remember those Dorito bags, or I remember that Minute Maid, like, what are they called? Cartons, I guess. So when I saw those Doritos things, I'm like, they're like the old school Dorito things, the Dorito bags. But anyway, Steven Spielberg has clout, is what I'm saying. Much more clout than Netflix would have. And then Taylor was like, but if Netflix did it, even if it was more accurate, they wouldn't have the budget that they would have, this big budget. But then I countered with, the book wasn't as grandiose. They didn't have like that race. They didn't even have to do the race. In the book, it was like traversing a cave and playing Joust. That's a lot cheaper to film than it is to create that CG race that they went through. So I think that if they had stuck to the book, they could do it on a lower budget and still get a really good effect. It kind of reminds me of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There's a BBC version that's super low budget but pretty accurate, at least the way I remember it. And then there's the big budget Hollywood version that was, not quite as close. But again, it's a time constraint issue, and they have to entice more people to see it. They have to get Joe Blow to see it, and so it's not really made for me. It's made for the general audience. So, but I get it. Anyway, just to kind of wrap up, again, I did like it. I do recommend it. I recommend it to anybody, honestly, for kids that won't get the references at all the way up to, people that were diehards and for some reason they're holding out because they've heard too many changes were being made. Just watch it. It's still fun. One warning for kids, the Shining part can get a little scary, so you may want to cover the little one's eyes or maybe see it beforehand and see if your child is going to be cool with that. I think it's fine, but I spend a lot of time explaining to my kids that movies are fake, and so it's kind of drilled into their heads that they don't really believe what they see on film or TV because I've drilled it into it. But just make sure that you're aware of that, because other than that, I think it's pretty kid friendly. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I want to make another video related to Ready Player One. I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to do it. It's related to the Oasis. The Alamo Drafthouse actually had this mini game called the Alamo Oasis that was kind of based on Ready Player One, where you found keys and stuff. It was really cool, and I actually got something in the mail from it, and I want to talk about it. So hopefully I get around to that, but I do have some other videos planned. If you have any comments, please put them below and let me know what you think. And again, thanks for watching.